a whole new bunch of research that someone's done. From the slave perspective, the British were the liberal, progressive force in that war. The so-called revolutionaries were the reactionaries trying to cling on to their slave power to keep the blacks down and then to go and move west and pinch Indian land. So the story we're told about, lovely progressive America against evil, hateful Britain, actually, if you read Simon Sharp's book, through the eyes of a slave, it was very, very different. And not long after that, the British did then outlaw slavery throughout, the empire. And the Americans didn't until a vast conflict erupted, finally in the 1860s, when this tension between the sort of liberal, moderate New Englanders, the sort of people of conscience, the Emersons, the Thoreaus and stuff, the Harvard University trained types, eventually had to confront the racist plantation owners who were very happy with slavery, thank you very much, and who misinterpreted the Bible and used it as a sort of justification for slavery. And the thinking went, okay, the white people are Christian, the black people are evil pagans, or maybe some were Muslims, from Africa. We have God's duty to civilize them and to use them, and therefore they are going to be our chattel. We're going to sell and buy them, and we're going to do what we want with them. We have power of life and death over them because we're the chosen race. We're the supreme white American people. Well, that's an unbelievably dangerous, stupid, and immoral kind of way of thinking. It underlies all the error of racism, which we've seen in Nazism, we've seen it in wherever racist ideology and violence get married. There's nothing wrong with loving your own people and taking pride in your people, but then going and saying, well, the other people are evil, I'm going to conquer them, is the ethical error there. And yet, that is the thinking behind these white supremacists who've been backing Trump. It's as if they really ought to read Simon Sharma's book and understand why the black Americans have had enough. I mean, the George Floyd killing by that policeman, which was the straw that broke the camel's back and led to the whole flourishing of the Black Lives Movement, that is just the end line of a huge couple of hundred years of unwritten history about the way the whites in America have been oppressing the blacks, and it goes back to the revolution. So anyway, I really recommend people to read Simon Sharma's book. It will, and what it does is it makes you see the USA history through a new lens. The USA was not born as a progressive liberal project. It was born as a repressive, almost counter-revolutionary movement in which propaganda was used to justify extreme reactionary policies, both against the indigenous populations and against the black slaves. So there's, it's a really interesting historical perspective. And so to watch the Biden victory, I mean, I think it is part of America's reckoning with history. It has to come to terms with all this. These white supremacists have to do their homework. They have to study this, and be taught the tragedy that is American history. If you look at the attempts to stop black people voting in America are so blatantly fraudulent, and they're still going on. And I don't know, the conscience of America needs reawakening. And it seems to me that Biden and Kamala Harris now and their supporters are the instrument of that. I can only call it a divine reawakening of conscience, because to me conscience is something that is divine. It comes from the divine. It's within us as a sort of spark of synderesis, the Greek term. Okay, so let's hope it isn't too late, because a lot of evil has been done by this last administration and by all the, the earlier right-wing administrations in America. The catastrophic invasion of Iraq in 2003, the Bush administration, their false allegations about the origins of the events of 9/11, they're spinning that into a justification for an illegal war in Iraq. This is all distortions of history, but it follows from that fundamental white supremacist, racist ideology that we, the white Americans, have the right to rule the world. No, you don't. You have to learn to share the world with the Arabs, the Chinese, the Greeks, the Europeans, the Irish, etc. I also see a wonderful supreme irony in the fact that Biden comes from this Irish lineage, and the Irish were the first colony colonized by these English, terrorists who thought that they had God's right to rule them. Well, no, they didn't, and don't. Okay, so that's very interesting. Moving on to the UK, I mean, what are the implications of this Biden victory for the UK? Well, I see the Brexit ideology as a very dangerous, pernicious, and equally sinister version of this supremacist, racist ideology that Trump stands for. Brexit is Britain rules the waves, Britain first. Let's leave the European Union. We hate the Europeans. They're all frogs. All the harsh rhetoric, racist rhetoric that the Brexit lot used to brainwash the normally moderate, good, liberal, decent, sensible people of my country, I watched in horror. It all came from the same stable that gave us Trump, and the link is Steve Bannon, who ran the data piracy of Cambridge Analytica and made the Brexit referendum go a certain way. Now he is obviously a criminal. I mean, I've known this all along. He's a mental criminal with no proper education. I mean, this is the problem. He's got power. He's had access to power. He's been to some of the right institutions. He knew some of the right people, but he's lost his moral compass, and I feel sorry for him. Because he people like that could go either way, but he's gone the wrong way. He's gone into the abyss of immorality, and he's now pending court cases, as Trump will be soon. The most recent thing he's done is call for the beheading of the FBI director and some other people. I mean the guy's obviously lost his marbles. Actually, you don't say that kind of thing and get away with it, except in some wargaming universe, and he thinks he's still playing war games. No sense of morality. Poor man. But it is more sinister because it's also brought Brexit to my country, and it's threatened the stability of my country's well-being. It's threatened the stability of the European Union. As a British Canadian living in France, it's threatened my right to live in France. It's threatened my French colleagues' right to live in England. It's and where's it come from? Well, it's the Trump, Brexit, Bannon worldview of extreme Manichaeism. And what they felt is that the European Union was their target in the Brexit rhetoric. And they played to the most reactionary, conservative and bigoted nationalism of English people, which fortunately the Scots, the Irish are inured to. The Welsh by and large, but they just sort of sneaked in. And this was a false rewriting of history. It's a narrative that appeals to the reactionary militaristic streak in British history. It's very easy to whip up a mob if you start yelling insults against the other people. This is what demagogues and dictators have always done ever since Hitler and Mussolini started their mob yelling. And that's what Brexit stands for, as you know. That's why I'm fasting every day, every Sunday, and will until Brexit is reversed. But Trump losing office is a huge blow in the madness that Brexit stands for. And where else does Brexit come from? Well, I've talked to many people about this, and collectively I'd say it comes from ignorance, just as Trumpism won because of ignorance. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's a sort of cult of ignorance around Trump. He's deliberately ignorant. He cultivates it as a sort of, I'm the ignorant one. I'm the guy off the street. Those intellectual East Coast types can't control me. I'm the man of the street, the man of the people. And so I call it sort of ignorant. It's a rule of ignorance that we've got here. Ignorocracy. Which comes from the root word to ignore. These people ignore warnings, they ignore signs, they ignore danger. And the conspiracy theories are part of it, because if you can generate crazy, fake conspiracy theories, it will appeal to certain people without substantial academic training to be able to weed out genuine from false conspiracy theories, and then it will create a sort of false knowledge, which is false gnosis. So I'm in the elite. I know QAnon is true. I know people that know people that know people that know it's true, etc. So that makes me feel special. I'm powerful. I'm important. Whereas you people that don't know this is true, you're stupid. You're ignorant. Me and Trump and us conspiracy people, we know the truth. And that's the false gnosis of a sort of a little elite that have the knowledge, which explain why, we're taking on the world kind of thing. But it stems from a misreading of gnosis and a mispresentation of genuine, esoteric wisdom. There's a sort of fake esotericism which Hitler had, and which Mao Zedong had dabbled in, and Stalin and so on. There's a sort of esotericism which hoards secret knowledge for its own advantage. And then there's a genuine esotericism which combines knowledge with love, which was Christ's point about teaching, to the ordinary people the secrets of the kingdom of God. He was trying to give away enlightenment, as was Buddha. If you look at the really great saints and sages of history, they try and share the highest form of gnosis with everybody because it's our birthright. It is who we are. That was Hegel's point. If you read his Phenomenology of Spirit and study his philosophy in depth, what he's saying in that book and the whole Hegelian movement is enlightenment is what we are. We are enlightened through our humanity, through our, implicit in all of us is this human spirit, which is wisdom, and the job of philosophy is to reawaken that in all of us. That is the supreme mystery of the kingdom of God. And Hegel realized that that's what Christ was teaching. Hegel, by the way, was a great esoteric student. He'd studied Jakob Boehme and Swedenborg and all the sort of occultists of the 18th and earlier centuries, and he was deeply studied in Hermetic mysteries. Most people think of Hegel as a really boring kind of philosopher, hardly studied in universities. Amazing polymath, historian of art, philosophy, logic, sciences, languages, cultures and religions. He was very advanced in his knowledge of comparative religion, advanced Buddhist thought, Sufi, Jewish, but also Hermetic mysteries. And Brian McGee's written a very important book, Hegel and the Hermetic Renaissance, which is seriously worth looking at. Also reveals how deeply knowledgeable about the Kabbalah Hegel was, which is the essence of the Jewish version of these esoteric mysteries, which says the same thing. We're all made in the image of God. So what is that image of God in which we're made? That's what the Kabbalah explains. That's what the Zohar's about. That's what Hegel was trying to explain too. And that's what all philosophers try and explain. That's what Plato was doing. Now that's the essence of the authentic mysteries. The fake, chatter around this is that that's all evil. That's all to be destroyed. And Trump and me were going to ultimately destroy wisdom. And that's why the ignoranti use ignorance as their weapon. Ignorance and lies. So they defame people. They call every liberal a sort of, they invent defamations in order to promote the cult of unreason, illogicality, and lies. And Trump was a perfect tool for them because he obviously is not intellectually very gifted. He's anti-intellectual. He poses as a successful businessman kind of guy, but isn't even a successful businessman. He's just a fake through and through, all the way down the line. And he's met his reckoning. Well, I pray and I hope and I believe that the Brexit reckoning is coming soon. British people are not stupid. We did abolish slavery. Well, let's abolish this new form of slavery, which is slavery to fake knowledge, slavery to ignorant overlords who seized power, I think unconstitutionally. I think the Tory party actually should be prosecuted for treason. I've said this before, you can read it on my blog. And, its policies are deliberately, well, I won't go on about that. You can read it on my blog, but the people of Britain have to rise up and have their Biden and Kamala Harris moment. And I don't think we have to wait for the next general election. I think we have to seize that moment with demonstrations, and of course they've just abolished demonstrations, but we can do it through the media, social media, and proper journalists, responsible journalists, need to pick up the lessons of what's happened in America. The reckoning will come for the UK as a result. And the people of Scotland are not stupid. People of Northern Ireland aren't. People of Ireland in general. And another point I want to say is I really appreciate Biden's pro-science stand. It's so refreshing to see an American president-elect saying, I actually believe in science. Science, I think, is the bedrock of the modern, worldview. I'm a great fan of Isaac Newton and the scientific enlightenment. I'm trying to extend that further in my book on the principles of religious mathematics to complement what Newton wrote. I think that science can go deeper. I think science can take cognizance of spiritual, metaphysical, psychical phenomena, but it has to do so rigorously. This is the point I made in my transpersonal history thesis, that, like Ken Wilber, I see history as moving in the direction of more and more subtle bands of knowledge and self-knowledge, both individually and collectively. But it's not about, like Mussolini's march on Rome. It's not a kind of Trumpian march on reality that we're going to change everything and, proclaim that actually Hitler and the white racists, they were right, after all, which is what the Trumpists fundamentally are arguing. Like David Icke and co. No, sorry, that's Mussoliniism, that's idiocy. No, authentic scientific discourse about the origin of the COVID virus is needed, and I'm really pleased to see Biden is inaugurating a council of scientific advisors to come up with the best forms of therapy and so on. The Lancet has just launched a similar commission, but there are problems in that the people on the Lancet Commission are very much indebted to the pharmaceutical industry and so on. I've said before and I'll say again, what we absolutely need, and what I would like Biden to do, is appoint or refer the matter to the United Nations. The United Nations should set up an investigative process into the origins of COVID-19. The Lancet can work alongside that. I was very moved, actually, to read that Biden married his lovely wife, Jill, who's a great educator and, again, a person of reason and philosophy and has a PhD like me, bless her. They got married in the little spiritual chapel at the UN headquarters, married by a Catholic priest. I was very moved to read that. I've been in that chapel and meditated there. I've spoken in the UN headquarters. It's a building I know and love in New York. I think Biden will be pro-UN. He's not a kind of idiot, anti-internationalist like Trump and all that they stand for. He will support the UN and he will help the UN and its mechanism to find out the cause and cure of this virus. I hope he will rejoin the WHO. I believe he will. And I'm delighted that he will be rejoining the Paris Climate Change Treaty, which Macron here in France helped set up. You know, some reason will redawn on American policy. So, yeah. And we can all do better. It's not like science should rest on its laurels. It's not science versus religion. It's science being scientific about religion. And that's the work of mine on the periodic table of religions. It's now my work in religious mathematics. I'm arguing that religion is so important, we have to be scientific about it. And science is so important, we have to be religious about it. If we do that, we can find a way for all the religions, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Druid, pagan, everything, Sikh, Jain, to come together in harmony, sign the Interfaith Peace Treaty, open the Golden Gate, create the Nonagon on top of the Pentagon. All the sort of utopian projects become possible once we get that essential goodwill of mutual co-enlightenment launched. Because at the moment the models we have are my enlightenment versus yours. I'm going to make my country great, yours can go to the dogs. It's that competitive spirit that underlies the Trump ideology and the Brexit ideology. It's my Britain's great, your Europe can go to hell kind of thinking. Well, no, that's wrong. Sorry, mark that homework. That's a fail. Do it again. No, the right thing is co-enlightenment. My Britain is lovely, it's great, as part of Europe. My country of America is great as part of the bigger world. And so rejoining UNESCO and all this stuff is just obvious. And reforming these institutions, of course. It's a continual process. So just to say that, talking of the role of intellectuals here, the reason I'm so against the pandering to ignorance of these sort of populist movements like Brexit and Trumpism is because they really offend me as an intellectual. Why do I bother to spend 20 years doing a PhD and studying every nuance of Cold War history from a transpersonal perspective? Why do I bother if I just get shouted down by people that throw mud at me? The anti-intellectuals behind Brexit and Trumpism do. So I'm deeply offended by the anti-intellectualism within Trumpism. And, I was very moved when Joe Biden said in his speech accepting the victory last night, he said, look, to all American educators, you've got someone in the White House now pointing at his wife. She is an educator like me, and yes, we do have an intellectual finally back in the White House as the wife of the president, I've read recently the autobiography of Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of Franklin Roosevelt, that Biden also greatly respects, by the way. You will have heard him recite his litany. Abraham Lincoln, Roosevelt, JFK are his intellectual heroes as president. They're all powerful people. And it was very interesting that it was on the 7th of November that Lincoln was first, I think, elected president as well. And that was yesterday. So, yes, I think that... so I can only do what I can do as an intellectual. I'm not a politician. I can't, I have no power, I have no clout. I can give ideas and advice, and that's what I do through my Peace Institute and also through the work now of the World Intellectual Forum. which is the thinking man's and woman's version of the World Economic Forum. The World Intellectual Forum is now meeting online every 30th of the month. We'll have another meeting on the 30th of November. If you're interested in what I'm saying, you want to engage in dialectic discourse, you have some points to make, you have some other things that you'd like to share, come and join. It's a free forum for what it's not, closed to is people that are just shouters, wreckers, destructivists, anti-intellectuals. Obviously, you're not welcome. Go and, shout somewhere else. But if you have genuine ideas, if you have a proposal or, vision like our friend that wants to build a huge tower for God, and other projects for peace, our concern is how can the intellectuals of the planet come together and oppose ignorant populism like Rob Ryman in the Netherlands? How can we generate a discourse that is peace-oriented? And I think the millions of people that voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, are part of that movement. And also I've been involved with the World Wisdom Council that's still going on. My friend Sachin Raja has been focalising that. It's a great work, and we're having some in-depth discussions about what does applied wisdom look like? What is wisdom? How can we as a planet reclaim our right to that? We're supposed to be Homo sapiens, right? The wise hominids, the wise people. Well, what's happened to that promise, To me, Brexit, Trumpism, it's all a retrograde move, which has wasted quite a few years, really. The Brexit referendum was in 2016, 4 years ago. I feel those entire 4 years have been wasted, when we should have been moving forward, reforming the EU, creating a European Union mediation service, creating peace in Ukraine, stopping conflict in Israel-Palestine, stopping conflict in North Africa. There's no reason for all the mass turbulence of these regions, apart from our ignorance. It was Camus' birthday yesterday as well, I note, and he's one of my heroes as an intellectual. He was born in North Africa. We need the European Union to create instruments for conflict resolution in all these regions, Mediterranean, Middle East, and so on. And to create, I was once part of a European Union project to create it was the European Federalist Association, based in London, to see if we couldn't have like a Middle East federation of some kind. And there was some intellectuals came together. This was back in the 90s. I still think it's necessary. The countries of the Middle East have to come together in peace and work out some kind of EU-type arrangement. And that has to include peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. I mean, the one thing I will say that I think Trump has done, which is worth a shout-out, is his crazy Israel-Palestine peace plan. I mean, I read the whole thing. Jared Kushner and his colleagues wrote the thing, I think. I've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I've commented on everything I think is positive and everything negative. Okay, so Trump moved the US embassy to Jerusalem. He would love to see peace in the Middle East. I mean, and the other thing that people say about Trump is what he's kept out of wars. Well, it's a kind of a negative achievement, but yes, it's something. He hasn't gone to nuclear war with any other country, thank God. But he has done some other reprehensible war-like things, like his war on the environment, his war on women, pulling out of the nuclear peace treaty with Russia and with Iran. These are warlike moves. But in the Israel-Palestine matter, he has put on the table a document which is interesting. And I think that some of it is salvageable. And I think that Biden and the peace team that crack on with peacemaking when they get into power should read my commentary on it and salvage some of it. I mean, maybe some little role for Trump could be found in his retirement, like was found for Tony Blair. ambassador to the Wailing Wall or something. I mean, that would keep him quiet. Because there are Israelis that love him, because he has tried his best to make peace in that region. He ought to also, maybe a good move would be to appoint him ambassador to Palestine, because that's the bit he forgot and left out of his peace treaty proposals. He never invited the Palestinians to the negotiations. Really good for his karma to be ambassador to Palestine. He could actually learn something. So anyway, there we are. The peace work continues, and I hope, and I'm just so relieved, like most of the planet, that we have now a half-decent chap and his lovely wife and Kamala Harris as Vice President coming into office in America. And I wish them well. I wish them, Godspeed. I think the other mark of the depth of Biden is that he's saying, look, I'm going to govern as an American president for the whole United States. He's about healing. And his speech last night was about time to heal. He quoted Ecclesiastes, which is correct. It is a time to heal. And his first duty is to somehow mitigate this virus as much as possible. And that's all our first duty. Here in France, we're all on lockdown again. It's been a shocking and disastrous time we've been living through as a planet these last 4 years. Starting with Brexit and then seeing things unravel as a logical consequence. In my book on mathematics and religion, I'm exploring the idea of a sort of ethical algebra. If you compute all the actions people make in their lives, the choices they take, is there some way of noting that? Is there a sort of notation we can develop? It's sort of ethical calculus taken to a high level. And I just published a book about this, The Ethical Calculus, which gives an overview of the history of ethics. I wish more people would read it. I wish politicians would read it. Some people have an intuitive sense of ethics, and I sense that Biden and Kamala Harris do. I don't sense that with Trump and Pence. They have an ethics of greed, egotism, lust for power, and sheer lust. That's not ethics. Right, so I'm going to finish with my poem as usual, and I hope that when we meet again in a week that no more terrible things have happened and that the good continues to advance. Okay, this is a poem I wrote 16 years ago, in 2004. And I wrote this in Hungary, in a beautiful little town called Sopron, which is just outside Vienna, but it's over the Hungarian border. And it's an amazing medieval town. If you ever get a chance to go to Sopron, go. It's not far from Vienna. I went into the synagogue there, and it's a very, very moving experience. It had a medieval synagogue, which is still intact. And what's beautiful is you have to walk down the steps to get to the floor of the synagogue, and I didn't realise this, but in medieval synagogue building, they had this idea that you should always build the floor below the street level, because when you pray, you should go down to face God, into the depths of your being. Not about sort of going up to make height. No, you go down to encounter God. And that was very moving. I was there for the International Peace Research Association conference of the day, which is an international body of peace researchers that I belong to and have been active in for many years. I knew its founders, Kenneth Boulding, Elise Boulding, and Tony DeRook, and many others who helped set up my Peace Institute. But anyway, that's why I was there, and I had time apart, and I went off and I read poetry, as is my wont. This is called For the Muse, poem 411. At the beginning, there was a whirlwind,